Welcome to Adulting Candle Company, where grown-up vibes meet cozy self-care. Whether you're manifesting peace with a crystal-infused candle, rewinding with a nostalgic wax melt, or turning your bathroom into a spa with our signature body products, we've got you. We're not just candles, we're a vibe. All handmade, ethically sourced, and wrapped in love. And sometimes glitter. Craving peppermint wonderland? Obsessed with opulent florals? Need a candle that says, "I survived today"? Yeah, we have all that too. Join the Adulting Candle Company fam and light your life. One intention, one flame, one fabulous scent at a time. Shop now at www.adultingcandleco.com or find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Adulting Candle Co. I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. A quick note before the show. World War I Stories Tales Beyond the Trenches is now available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle. You heard that right. I've handpicked 10 stories from the podcast, arranged them into a book, and released Volume 1 to the masses. So if you love these stories and would like to own them in ebook or paperback, simply search for World War I Stories Tales Beyond the Trenches on Amazon. And don't shy away from sharing the podcast or even the book with those who love historical fiction. And now, today's episode, The Tsar's Will Be Done. The conversation stopped mid-sentence when the door creaked open and the stranger stepped inside. Yuri's eyes immediately fell on their uniforms, their heavy, worn greatcoats of dull gray green that seemed to be too large for their frames, and the tall, dark, matted shapkas atop their heads, the fur seeming out of place in the warmth of the bakery. Slung over their shoulders were Mosin Nagant rifles, the metal gleaming dully in the light. The soldiers' worn boots scraped the floor with each step, a sharp contrast to the quiet comfort of Yuri's bakery. Their faces, hard and cold, gave nothing away as they moved further inside. Yuri stood behind the counter, maintaining eye contact with the soldier that led the small procession. "May I assist you with something?" he asked. The lead soldier, with whom he had been looking at directly, now broke eye contact and directed his gaze at the two villagers that Yuri had been talking to in the bakery. "Leave. Now," he said coldly. Yuri watched in silence as his neighbors quickly exited the shop. "I'll have your orders ready in just a few hours," he yelled after them. He turned again to the soldier. "What is the meaning of this?" The man removed his gloves one by one and returned his gaze to Yuri. "Is this your bakery?" The man's cold delivery made him nervous. Why did they want to know? "It is. Why?" "By order of the Tsar, you are to cease all baking for this village and redirect your efforts to supplying bread for the army, starting immediately. I have a wagon outside with flour and grain. You will be provided with supplies and compensated 50 kopecks per day." Yuri scoffed. 50 kopecks per day? The Tsar expects me to replace the 5 rubles I make each day with this meager sum? I can barely buy flour for a loaf with that. How am I supposed to feed my family and pay for the shop? The soldier's face remained unreadable. "You will be provided with wheat and grain, as I said. The 50 kopecks per day should be sufficient for you and your family. If it is not, then you and your family must make sacrifices for the Tsar and for your country. We are at war, Baker. This is your duty." Yuri opened his mouth to argue, but as his gaze flickered to the other two soldiers, he saw them begin to shift their rifles from their backs, their movements slow and deliberate. Yuri's throat tightened and he swallowed hard. There was no point in protesting further. He simply nodded in reluctant agreement. The lead soldier's expression softened just slightly as if acknowledging Yuri's silent acquiescence. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said flatly. He turned to leave, but paused at the door, his boots scraping against the floor. Without looking back, he spoke to one of the other soldiers. "Stay here. Keep an eye on things." He turned to the other. "Bring in the supplies, then meet me next door at the blacksmith's." Then he started to leave. Yuri's voice shook with frustration. "How do you expect me to bake for an army and a village? What if I can't keep up?" The soldier turned back, his expression unchanged. "Like I said before, you are only to bake for the Tsar's army. The village will have to fend for themselves. We will supply you daily, bake until you run out. There will be wagons waiting." With that, he turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Yuri stared at the door long after it closed, the quiet hum of his bakery now filled with the sounds of his own thoughts. The door, which had so often creaked to life with the familiar sounds of villagers coming and going, now felt like a barrier between his life and the world outside. His hands, still sticky with the dough from his last batch of bread, trembled ever so slightly as he wiped them on his apron. His thoughts were heavy, as if they too had been turned to stone. The familiar warmth of the oven, the comforting scent of freshly baked bread, suddenly felt cold. It was the same smell, but now it seemed different, tinged with something bitter. The war, it seemed, had finally found its way into his life, and it wasn't leaving any time soon. The room that had once felt like his sanctuary now felt alien, as though he were a stranger in his own space. The amount of supplies the army was giving him was overwhelming. Sacks of flour, barrels of grain, and crates of basic ingredients flooded his small bakery. He found himself working longer hours than ever before in an effort to deplete the daily stock. The routine became monotonous. As soon as the dense loaves of black bread emerged from his oven, a soldier would appear, taking the warm bread and loading it into waiting transport. Without pause, Yuri would begin again, mixing, kneading, shaping, only to repeat the cycle. The once familiar scent of yeast and freshly baked bread had become a dull marker of his labor, tinged with the grit of survival. The hours blurred together. His back ached from hours of standing, his hands cracked and raw from the dough. The heat of the oven was no longer a comfort. It was a constant, unyielding pressure on his tired body. Each batch, each hour, felt like a clock ticking towards the inevitable. The weight of the work was more than just physical. It was a slow drowning, as the village, the life he knew, slipped further from his grasp. But Yuri wasn't alone. Daria, his wife, had also been pressed into service. Her gentle hands, once used for attending to the home and family, now worked beside him in the bakery. She ground the flour, helped with the heavy lifting, and kept a careful eye on their son Grigory, who, at 10 years old, was still too young to be of much use. Grigory tried his best to help, though. He would follow behind his parents, gathering what supplies he could carry, and would also clean up after each batch, washing dishes, wiping tables, sweeping the floor. This had become a family endeavor. Yuri caught glimpses of Daria as she worked, her face tired, her eyes a little duller with each passing day. She never complained, but Yuri could see how the pressure wore on her too. They were both caught in this relentless cycle, unable to escape, unable to stop. They had just finished a batch when Daria spoke. "Did you hear about the Orlovs?" He was fetching a new bag of flour for the next batch as he answered. "Fedor came to me last evening. He told me of his plans." Yuri and Daria had about 2 hours each night to perform household duties and prepare for the next day of grueling work. Fedor Orlov had called on Yuri because he was distressed by the current situation. His stables had also been commandeered by the army, and he was spending 14 hours per day tending to horses that were constantly being rotated in and out of service. Daria had set down the bowl she was cleaning. "Well, what do you think?" Yuri set the bag of flour on the table. I think he's made the decision he feels is best for his family, and I'm starting to accept that we may not have any other choice but to follow it. Us? Leave as well? Where would we go? He looked at her, and he saw her eyes had gotten unusually wide. I don't know, but if you listen closely, the war is getting nearer to us than I'm comfortable with. And to be honest, I cannot keep up this pace. It's exhausting. She walked over and put her arms around him. Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid to bring it up to you. I want out. For us. For Grigory. We get 50 kopecks a day. We must save it all for the next 2, maybe 3 weeks. That plus we've saved should get us housing somewhere away from here. We can come back when this war is over. She nuzzled her head into his chest. Hopefully, I love this village. They were still in their embrace when the front door opened and the soldier who was on guard entered. You two, come, now. Yuri and Daria exchanged glances, not knowing what was going on. But as they looked past the soldier and out the door, they could see all the town shopkeepers filtering into the street. They all looked confused. The soldier stomped his right foot into the floor. Come, now! They broke their embrace and made their way to the street with the rest of their friends and neighbors. Daria realized what was happening before he did. Oh God, she muttered. What? Yuri asked, his attention still fixed on the street ahead of him. She pointed towards the stables, her finger trembling slightly. Yuri followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped when he saw Fyodor Orlov and his family. The sight of Olga, Fyodor's wife, clutching their 2 children, 6-year-old Alexandria and 2-year-old Lev, stuck him like a punch to the gut. They were surrounded by the Tsar's soldiers, all of them armed and unmoving, their rifles trained on the family. Standing nearby, his posture rigid and unyielding, was the same man who had come into Yuri's shop a month ago to vocalize the Tsar's orders. The man's eyes flicked toward them briefly, his face cold, impassive. Yuri could feel the tension rise, the quiet weight of authority in the air. After a few moments, the soldier spoke in a loud, commanding voice. Earlier today, Mr. Fyodor Orlov came to me expressing his desire to hand over his stables to the army and myself. It's a fantastic gesture, I must admit. He wishes to leave this village and all of you and go to St. Petersburg. He paused and walked in a circle, dragging the toe of his right boot in the dirt. Yuri looked on as the soldier then nodded at one of the men surrounding the family. He felt extreme relief as he watched the circle of soldiers change into a line behind the family. He saw the family start to smile, the idea of not being surrounded easing the tension that they had felt. He watched as Olga picked up Lev and Fyodor picked up his bag. They were preparing to walk away, to leave. The townspeople collectively breathed a sigh of relief. Everything happened so fast. The soldier barked an order. The others lifted their rifles, the shots rang out, the family fell, and the town received the Tsar's message. Yuri looked on as Daria carefully placed the small frosted cake on the table in front of Grigory. It was his 12th birthday, and despite the weight of their daily struggles, they had succeeded in sneaking a cake into the oven with the last load of black bread. Daria had used the smallest amount of sugar, and the frosting was thin, but it was enough. For today, it was enough. Grigory smiled as he began to devour the small cake. Daria looked on, managing a smile herself, something Yuri had not seen too often over the past year. She had taken the fate of the Orlovs especially hard. She had grown up with Olga, and at one point they had been inseparable. But he knew that the hardest part for Daria was knowing that their plan to leave was now a broken dream. He relished her moments of happiness, though, no matter how brief they may be. Son, Yuri began, his voice soft but steady, you've had to grow up faster than you should have, and for that I'm sorry. But make no mistake, your mother and I are incredibly grateful for all your help in the bakery. Grigory looked up at his father, the thin, runny frosting still hanging from his upper lip. I like the bakery, Pa. I get to help make bread and spend time with you. I never really got that before. I used to have to share you with the customers, so this is pretty nice. Yuri sat on that realization for a moment. He had never realized that Grigori could possibly feel that way. Well, at least something good came from all of this. A loud bang rang through the bakery and the walls shook violently. Daria looked at him with wide eyes. The shelling is getting closer. I know, Yuri started. It's getting dangerous. Her gaze turned thoughtful. People are starting to try and leave again. I hear the gunshots at night as they get caught. The other night it was the Petrovs. I didn't hear gunshots. Maybe they made it. What are you getting at? He asked her. You want to try? I don't know. I feel if we stay here, something bad will happen. But if we try to leave, we'll get caught, she responded. Grigori picked up a napkin and wiped his face. I don't think it's a good idea to try to leave, Mama. At least here, the army's supposed to protect us. If we try to go, they'll shoot us. He's right, Yuri responded. It's dangerous here, yes, but at least the army's here, and at least for now, are on our side. They wouldn't be on our side at all if we tried to leave. She hung her head down. I know, she said. We should go get some rest. They walked the short distance to their small home to retire for the night. Yuri awoke to the noise first. Someone was yelling. He quickly rose, dressed, and went outside. There, in the middle of the street, he found two soldiers locked in a heated debate. Our orders are to stay here and protect this village at all costs. The short, stocky soldier was adamant, his voice hard, with a clear note of desperation behind it. If we do that, we'll all be dead. The other soldier, slightly taller with a crooked nose, snapped back. His words were sharp with panic. Yuri stepped forward, drawn in by their argument. They both stopped and looked at him. What's going on? He asked. His voice was steady, but laced with the curiosity he couldn't suppress. The short soldier raised his hand, motioning for the other to remain silent. This is none of your business. Go home. None of my business? I live here. My family lives here. You're just visiting. How is it none of my business when you're talking about us all dying? Yuri's words came out sharper than he intended. It was dangerous to speak to the Tsar's soldiers like this, but he couldn't stay silent. The soldier with the crooked nose stepped forward, his gaze hardened. Sir, you're the baker, yes? Yuri nodded. Yeah, that's right. Everything's fine. Please, sir, just go home. Go to your bakery, enjoy your day, the crooked-nosed soldier said, his voice flat, but there was a faint tremor in his words. Yuri didn't back down. You owe it to everyone in this village to tell us what's going on, why you're so scared, and don't say you aren't. I can see it in your faces. The short soldier, growing impatient, removed his rifle from his shoulder. What did you say? Yuri stepped forward, his jaw tight. I said you're scared. Are you going to shoot me for that? Because if you do, it just proves to everyone that I'm right. Now we deserve to know what's going on. The crooked-nosed soldier moved quickly, stepping between them, his expression unreadable. Sir, he began, addressing Yuri, his voice even but tinged with quiet threat. I suggest you leave now. Go home. Go to your bakery before you say something you and your family will regret. Yuri backed up 3 paces, but didn't lower his gaze. I'll go. But if anyone in this village gets hurt because you're hiding the truth, I will find you, and it won't be the Germans or the Austrians you'll have to be afraid of. For a long moment, the tension hung thick in the air. The soldiers stood motionless, their eyes locked on Yuri as if waiting for something. Finally, the crooked-nosed soldier gave a sharp nod, signaling to the short soldier to turn and leave. Yuri stood there, still, watching as they disappeared into the street. The heavy silence lingered long after they were gone. Yuri stepped through the door, his breath still coming in ragged bursts. Daria was standing near the stove, her hands frozen in place as she turned to face him. What happened? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Yuri swallowed hard, trying to calm the unease that gnawed at him. They were arguing, those 2 soldiers outside. One of them says we need to stay here and protect the village. The other, well, he said staying would get them all killed. Daria's brow furrowed. And what did you say?" "What could I say?" Yuri muttered. "I told them that I could see the fear in their eyes, and I demanded to know what was going on." Daria's eyes widened slightly. "Yuri, you can't just confront them like that." "What else was I supposed to do? They're scared, Daria. If they're so terrified, then why are they staying here?" Yuri shook his head in frustration. "If they're running from something, shouldn't we know? We're just sitting here, baking bread, waiting for some order we're never gonna get." Daria hesitated for a moment, her hand still trembling. She walked over to him, placing her hand on his arm. "Maybe they don't know either. Maybe they're just waiting for someone to tell them what to do." Yuri's gaze darkened as he stared out the window, his mind racing. But what if no one's coming? They woke Grigori and made their way to the bakery where, like clockwork, the supplies were waiting. However, it was noticeable, like it had been over the last few weeks, that there was less flour and less grain than yesterday. They finished just after sunset, and like usual, a steady stream of soldiers had come in and out to take the bread to wherever it needed to go. Now they were cleaning. Grigori was sweeping the floor by the front door to the bakery when he spoke. "Ma, Pa, you should come here. Something is weird." Yuri and Daria stopped what they were doing, shared a glance, and made their way to the door. It was quiet, still, dark. Only the dim lights of the shops that lined the street gave them a glimpse into the world outside. They all stepped outside and shared confused looks. "What the?" Yuri exclaimed. Next door, the blacksmith stepped out of his shop looking as confused as they did. The man who had taken over the stables followed soon after. Then the tailor joined them. One by one, the town's shopkeepers emerged, standing on the quiet street, eyes flickering nervously towards each other. Yuri looked at Daria, his voice low. "Where are they?" Daria didn't answer right away. She turned her eyes slowly from one end of the street to the other. "Gone." Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're all gone." Yuri's chest tightened. He turned slowly, scanning every corner of the street. No soldiers. No wagons. Just an empty, waiting village. Yuri stepped towards the street. Even though the street was obviously empty, he was cautious as he stepped out, looking both directions for any signs of the Tsar's men. There were none. The blacksmith, Leon, joined him. They locked eyes and nodded at each other. Nothing needed to be said. Soon they were joined by their families and the other shopkeepers up and down the street. There were smiles, but the tension was still present. Was this real? Yuri wondered if he should share the conversation with the two soldiers that morning, but chose not to ruin the moment. Everyone was at peace for the first time in almost 2 years. Let them bask in it for a day, he thought to himself. It was Grigori that broke the jubilant silence. "They're gone. They're really gone." And the solemn celebration began. The early morning sun crept slowly through the bakery window, casting soft light over the familiar worn counters and old equipment. It felt like a dream, a moment that could last forever. They had made it through. The daylight confirmed that the soldiers had gone. Daria turned to Yuri as they sat at the table sipping their tea, their bodies relaxing for the first time in almost 2 years. "We have a little flour, some grain. We can still make bread. Maybe we should give it away to the village for now, at least until we can get back to normal." Yuri had been deep in thought about who to contact now for supplies. He had a supplier 2 years ago, but were they still around? The war had changed a lot. Daria's words crept into his consciousness. "I think that's a good idea. The people need to eat, and if we can help, we should." "We have 3 pounds of grain and 2 of flour," Grigori interjected as he walked out of the kitchen. Yuri looked at his wife and son. "That'll get us started. Let's get to work." And they did. It was near lunchtime when they heard it. It sounded like horses and footsteps. Daria was the first to move towards the door. Yuri followed her. Making their way through the village were soldiers. They were in motor cars, they were on horses, they were on foot, and they all spoke German. You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. If this episode stayed with you, if it stirred something quiet or left you in stillness, share it, follow the show, leave a rating, help keep these stories alive. Our first collection now lives on Kindle. Search World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, Volume 1 in your Kindle app, and carry these echoes with you. For glimpses behind the curtain and stories between the stories, join me on Instagram at WWIPod_HennyB. And if you'd like to see your name in the credits, become a producer. Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/World War I Stories and help power the next tale into existence. Thank you for walking back in time with me.